is the cloud coverage in Valdosta from Dorian. You might have some outflow moving through, but most of our cloud cover today is just going to be from the typical daytime heating that you get, not really associated with Dorian. How many miles wide is the hurricane? Well, the entire hurricane, if you take a ruler from one side of it to the other, we're talking the clouds almost 500 miles out. So you see there, that's a pretty impressive scale. This thing is huge. And for something 500 miles wide to be moving 1 mile per hour, super impressive. So again, a lot of things about Dorian are impressive. This is already the second strongest storm to ever impact anywhere in the Atlantic basin. The eye of Dorian, not quite as wide. I believe that is about 20 miles at this point. Let's see. About 30 miles the eye of Dorian is. So again, folks have been inside that eye for 6-7 hours, seeing this calm weather, and they're about to get back into the eye wall here soon as it does continue to work kind of northwest. So that's good. When you see it kind of working north there, we want that northerly turn. The sooner the better. Then it's going to lessen the impact for the east coast of Florida. So let's take a look at this track now. Swanee, cloudy and drizzling. Yep, that is nothing here is really associated with Dorian quite yet, as we're going to be seeing any, again, potential impacts from that. It's going to be hot and sunny for the rest of the week, because Dorian's going to be way too far east to impact us locally. Here's the latest track again. Dorian's a Category 4 hurricane now, no longer a Category 5. It was a Cat 5 more than 24 hours, which is impressive in its own right. So now it's a Category 4. Max winds at 155 miles per hour. This is still extremely dangerous. Gusts near 200 miles per hour. That's at 190. It's moving west at only 1 mile per hour. You can walk faster than Dorian is moving right now. And again, that scale, almost 500 miles wide, that's kind of impressive. But this track is going to be moving real slow for the next 24 hours, and it is going to really struggle to see that kind of northerly turn till you get into early tomorrow. It's not going to be that much of the component, but the fact that it's moving so slow is promising. It's not really getting anywhere anytime soon. It's about 100 miles offshore of Palm Beach County there. So this is Tuesday, 8 a.m., this little icon here. So in just under 24 hours, we're going to start to see it approaching the coastline. And again, you can kind of see it further north than its current position. It's going to be a very slow, gradual turn in the next 24 hours before we really start to see that northerly component kick in. And models are getting into better agreement now that this storm will be riding right up along the coast. National Hurricane Center is not forecasting a Florida landfall, but again, don't pay attention to the track, pay attention to the cone. The left side of the cone, you can see the eye on the left side of the cone or the right side of the cone. Left side of the cone would indicate a landfall. Even if it moved up the eastern coast, parts of the western coast of Florida, it can get some rain. Yeah, the good news though for us locally, Maddie, is that any local impacts, even if we do see some rain, they're going to be on kind of the lower scale of things. Because again, if you take Dorian's track out here up when it gets to North Florida, kind of that I-10 Jacksonville corridor, assuming that Dorian stays in the center of the track, hopefully, we're looking at low impacts, as we're going to be on the dry side of that circulation. Remember, hurricanes rotate counterclockwise. So if we zoom out here, say Dorian's right about here, we're going to be seeing that kind of rotation wrapping around the back side of it, and that's going to be pulling some dry air down. So our forecast locally, Tallahassee, North Florida, South Georgia, hot and sunny through midweek, as we are not going to be seeing those direct tropical impacts. Now, again, the further to the left of the cone, the better chance at direct impacts. When will it be coming to Fort Lauderdale? It's going to be a little bit north of Fort Lauderdale. You might see some gusty winds, but I'd say by tomorrow you're going to be seeing the maximum impact late tonight into tomorrow, but no direct hurricane hit. How much bigger is this storm than Michael? It's pretty similar to Michael right now, but at its maximum intensity, this was at 180 miles per hour. It's the second strongest storm in the Atlantic basin to make landfall anywhere since the 1935 Labor Day hurricane in the Florida Keys, which I don't think many of us remember. So this is kind of, again, unprecedented. Again, Michael, we all know what those impacts were. You drive down I-10, you're from Panama City, you're from Southwest Georgia, you're from Mariana. It's widespread damage, pretty much that whole area. You can tell a major hurricane went through there. Now imagine if Michael sat still on top of Panama City for 24 hours. You have areas in Freeport that are seeing those eye wall conditions right now. the eye wall is going to be over Freeport for the next day as the storm slowly moves west. So if you can somehow kind of imagine that Hurricane Michael sitting in one place for 24 hours or moving 1 mile per hour, it's hard to imagine. So again, this is kind of, I don't think that Dorian can be compared with any other storms that we are familiar with, as you're going to have to wait till after the fact, but we just don't know the impact and the outcome of what's going to happen here. So that's for the Bahamas. It is gradually weakening again on its approach up the coast, and we're hoping that it doesn't make a Florida landfall at all. So the further to the right of the cone, the lesser the impacts. If we see it stay on this right side of the cone, we're going to be seeing, again, maybe tropical storm force winds. But I think the hurricane force wind field right now is about 25, 30 miles outside of the actual center of the storm. So small variations in the track up the coast will have a huge impact on what those folks up and down the I-95 corridor feel. If you have a storm that makes landfall or rides right along the coast, that's worst case scenario. You're going to be seeing those higher impacts, especially if it makes landfall. But if it goes up the center or goes right, you're going to push that kind of hurricane force wind field further offshore, which will lessen impacts. You'll be seeing lighter winds. So let's see if we got any more questions. Michael was a category 2 or 3. Michael was a category 5 at landfall after reanalysis. It was a high-end 4 at landfall, but they did change that looking back. More in-depth description of what moves the highs. So here we go. I think I got what you're looking for. This graphic is a few days old, something to consider, as this was when Dorian was further east, but this is kind of going to give you an idea of why Dorian's making that northward turn here in the coming days. So we have this upper level ridge of high pressure that's kind of situated over the western Atlantic. Now this is for you. Again, we're right here, right now, slower movement. This is what Dorian is doing, stalling out, slowing down as you're looking at that high pressure system, really kind of weak steering flow. So there's nothing in the upper levels of the atmosphere that are controlling Dorian's movement right now. That's why it's sitting still over warm waters and it's weakening very, very slowly. Now over the next couple of days, we need this high pressure system to kind of retrograde off to the east or weaken a bit. And when it does that, it's going to give Dorian this escape route up to the north. So again, we know this is happening. Again, it's a very advanced time for computer models. It's still not perfect. We can't tell you exactly where hurricanes are going to go, but you can forecast these general patterns and these trends in the atmosphere. So when this high pressure moves off towards the east and weakens a bit, it's going to let Dorian ride up the coast. So this is what's going to happen by the next 24, 36 hours when we start to see this northern turn. Right now, the latest trends are slowly north, but I wouldn't say it's making that northward turn. This is over the past 6 hours. Again, Dorian's barely been moving in the past 6 hours, so it's hard to get any kind of general consensus of the direction it's going. Slightly northwest, but any northerly component that we see here, this is good. So you do see it's kind of from the end to the beginning, it is kind of a northwesterly component at the moment, heading that direction, and that's good. The further the north, the better, because yesterday we saw this move from Marsh Harbor to Grand Bahama Island straight westerly. So a little bit of a turn north for now. It's going to, okay, but the next 24 hours, we're tracking this and it's going to be moving real slow. I mean, look at where we are right now, right over Grand Bahama Island. And look at where we're going to be tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. just on the other side of this island, and areas like Freeport will still be in that eye wall. So that's not going to be good for the folks in the Bahamas, but we are going to continue to see this kind of northerly turn in the coming days. By Wednesday morning, we're going to be up off the coast of Volusia County, Daytona Beach area, getting near St. Augustine, hopefully offshore. We don't want this thing to make landfall. So that's what we're going to continue to look at. It does look like if there's going to be a landfall in Florida, it's going to be maybe around this Space Treasure Coast area, maybe further north. More likely that we see a landfall on the northern half of Florida than the southern half of Florida. Again, pay attention to the cone. If you are in the cone, you can be impacted by the eye of the storm. That's kind of what this cone means, is that the eye of the hurricane could travel up the right side of the cone, most likely the middle of the cone, but also the left side of the cone. So if you're in the cone, you're looking at the direct impacts being possible, and that landfall could be anywhere from central up through North Florida. And that will be in the next couple of days. Tomorrow, Wednesday, is when those primary impacts will be felt. Again, yep, Michael, again, Whitney, we know that. That's kind of the baseline for me to compare this, to kind of have an intuitive way to know how destructive Dorian is going to be. But even then, Dorian was stronger than Michael. Dorian is moving slower than Michael. So Dorian was a Cat 5, 180 miles per hour winds. It's down to 155. We're at a strong Cat 4. It doesn't make much of a difference. Again, I don't like to say that Dorian is weakening right now, even though it is. There's not much of a difference between a Cat 4 and a Cat 5. It's going to be extremely destructive either way. So you can't let your guard down. Even for these folks up the East Coast, Cat 3, weakening to a Cat 3, it doesn't matter. If a Cat 3 makes landfall, you're going to have horrible impacts once you tack on the storm surge and the winds that you get with Dorian. So it's not something that you need to kind of let your guard down, but those folks up and down the 95 corridor, they're evacuating today. Today's the day that you kind of have to make up your mind whether you're hunkering down or you're evacuating. So people are doing that today. That's good. Those preparations need to be wrapped up by now. Let's see. I'm trying to catch up with these questions. Thank you guys for asking as many as you can. It makes it easier for me, so I'm not just talking the whole time. How do you guys know it's going to turn? We showed this graphic earlier. We are looking at that upper level ridge of high pressure kind of breaking down in the Atlantic. So this is making it turn west. And as it weakens, we are seeing, again, stalling out, slower movement. As this upper level ridge of high pressure moves out of the way, off to the right, that is when we get this storm giving an escape route up to the north. So we're not going to be making landfall anymore. This is what we showed you last week. There's kind of three scenarios for us here locally in the North Florida, South Georgia area. Worst case scenario was Dorian going in the Gulf of Mexico. We kind of wiped that off the list. We're not looking at a worst case scenario. The most likely tracks here with Dorian down in the Bahamas will kind of be up this route just offshore. This is kind of through the center of the National Hurricane Center's cone, off into the ocean. Then we're looking at a low impact scenario. You could also see this scenario riding through the Bahamas. If we do get this landfall, it would likely kind of just still ride up the coast. Again, we know it's going to escape up in this direction. We're not going to see a direct hit in Tallahassee. We're not going to see this go into the Gulf, but this would be a little bit higher of an impact. We'd see a little bit more rain, but with the center of the storm being around here, we're going to be wrapped around the back side of that, getting a lot of dry air. Our forecast looks dry and quiet. Are there more tropical systems after Dorian? Well, we actually have a handful right now. I can show you this graphic. That's for Ken Michaels. You asked this question. Look at what's going on in the tropics. There's a lot, okay? It's September. We're getting to the peak of hurricane season, so it's going to be busy in the coming days. The good news is that none of these, aside from Dorian, pose any immediate threats to land, especially locally speaking. Now, you got this wave just in parts of the western Gulf. This is moving west, a 50% chance to develop, but that's going to impact the east coast of Mexico, maybe far southern Texas. Not an issue for us, locally speaking. Got this wave over in the central Atlantic. This is moving north. This is going to impact maybe Bermuda, but for the most part, it's out in open water. You got these two off the coast of Africa, one just still on the west coast of Africa, about to move offshore. Low development chances. This one that's in the eastern Atlantic will likely develop 80% in the next couple of days, but look at this kind of development area, this little red hatched polygon, that's way north. So there's no chance of this thing making it into the Gulf. So again, the tropics are busy right now. There are a lot of potential areas to develop, but no immediate threats out there. Dorian is really the big concern, and locally speaking, Dorian's not even a huge concern. Here's your tropical storm force wind probabilities. Look how low they are for us. Again, if you live in Tallahassee or westward, you got about a 5-10% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. We're probably not going to see that. But for areas closer to I-75, closer to Jacksonville, there you're looking at those probabilities climbing exponentially as you drive east down I-10. Over towards Jacksonville in the Atlantic coast, they're probably going to be seeing those tropical storm force winds at least. Hopefully, the best case scenario right now with Dorian's track and positioning would be tropical storm force winds maximum. That is if Dorian stays to the right side of the cone. They might see tropical storm force winds, but that definitely beats a major hurricane making landfall on your shore. And those hurricane warnings are, again, have been extended up through parts of Volusia and Flagler County. So this area, all up and down the coast under a hurricane warning. These are all coastal watches and warnings. Of course, the Bahamas, they're seeing those conditions now. If you live down towards West Palm, further south into Fort Lauderdale, Miami, threat's a little bit lower. Tropical storm watch, tropical storm warning. Again, the storm is not going to move south over the next few days. If anything, it's going to move north. It can move west, east, north, but south is not one of those directions that we're looking at. It's not going to lose latitude with time. So if anything, Dorian's going further north, so those impacts felt further down towards South Florida. No major concerns for the folks in Miami, for the Keys. Yeah, they're going to get some gusty winds and some rainfall. They're already seeing some outer bands push on shore, but they're being spared from those direct impacts, no landfalls, anything like that. So that's good news. Again, if you guys do have questions, please shoot them in the comments, and I'm trying to answer as best as I can, as quick as I can. It does make it easier on me too, and I'm not just talking. We can look at Dorian again. This is over the past 6 hours. You see it working kind of northwest. And again, it is, if you track through where the center is for the past 6 hours, you can see it is starting to move into a more northwesterly direction. So it's not making that complete turn yet. It's only moving 1 mile per hour. It's barely moving, but it is kind of heading that way. So it's not heading straight towards the Palm Beach coast off to the west, and that's good. We want to see this thing moving further north than further west. Yesterday it made landfall on Marsh Harbor, and it moved right here. Over the past 24 hours, I think we can pull the past 24 hours for you. Maybe not. But you see where it is now, so we're starting to get a little bit more of a northerly component there to that turn. That's good news. The further north it goes, the less potential it has to impact folks in Florida. I don't want to say locally. We're not really expecting much locally. Here's that track for you. If you guys have seen any of the pictures, any of the videos circulating on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's unbelievable. Again, you can't really compare this storm to anything we've ever seen. Tyler, how about our hometown buddy? Like I said, I'm from Brevard County. Mandatory evacuations going on right now for the barrier island, and I know a lot of people are heading out there. If you get mainland, that's probably for the best. It's going to be one of those things where it just depends on the track that Dorian takes here, especially for the folks up and down Brevard County and Volusia, Flagler, up towards St. Augustine, Jacksonville, because look how close the track actually takes it to the shore. It's very similar to Matthew in 2016. If you recall, Matthew stayed 20-30 miles offshore as a Cat 4, and so did the strongest winds. But our coastal communities were really spared from Matthew because it didn't make landfall until it made it up to North Carolina just as a Cat 1. Now, of course, the inland flooding was a whole different story with Matthew, but this isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about major hurricane impacts in the form of wind, the form of storm surge, and that will be the closer to the coast, the worse those impacts get. So remember, it's not about the track, it's about the cone of uncertainty. There's just uncertainty with hurricane forecasting. It is what it is, okay? It's not a perfect science, and you can't forecast exactly where they go, but pretty good trends show it staying offshore. Now, if we do stay to the left side of the cone and you get a landfalling hurricane towards Indian River, Brevard, Volusia County as a Cat 3, Cat 4, you're going to have some, again, serious damage going on there. So that is why these evacuation orders are in place. It's better to be safe than sorry. Again, you had all weekend, and I think that most folks along the coast are generally prepared pretty well at this point. Dorian's been talked about for more than a week now, I believe since a week from last Friday, so almost 10 days since it turned into a tropical wave. So I think